Okay, so this next video lecture is still the continuation of our module 1, so the basic principles of taxation. So we will be discussing about the next topic under this module. So this is entitled the distinction of tax from similar items. Okay, so basically there are other uh, payment or collections that are made by the different government agencies that are different from taxation or tax. So the first is penalty. So basically penalty does not operate like just like the tax. Okay, so it is a sanction imposed for any violations, whether you will be made to pay a fine or someone who violated the law, for example, will be subject to imprisonment for such violation. But when you are made to pay the taxes, on the other hand, that this is an enforced contribution, and this is again different from the penalty because again taxes are collected because an entity or property have generated income. Okay, because they have income, so they are subject to taxation. But again, penalty, uh, it arises from the person violating the law, okay, or rule or order of our society. Okay. What about debt? Okay, so here a debt arises from a contract. So this is the same with payable or obligation to pay because one person may have uh, asked for a credit, okay, or um, someone may have uh, some unpaid liability or obligation. Okay, so this arises from a contract. It may be expressed or implied, while tax class is created by our law. Okay, so based on our definition in the previous video lecture. Okay, so uh, as to the effect of non-payment of this liability, no person can be imprisoned, okay, for not paying their liability or debt. Okay, please take note of that. While in the case of non-payment of tax, someone may have evaded or not paid, okay, for their tax dues, may be fined or imprisoned or both. Okay, plus or in addition to their tax dues or tax payable, plus any surcharges or interests. Okay. So number three, as to set off of or compensation. So taxes are not subject to set off or compensation, meaning you cannot work to pay for your taxes. It should be paid in cash. Unlike in the liability or debt, you may if with the consent of the debtor, he may uh, provide service, okay, to offset their liability or to pay for their liability. But again, it should be compulsory on the part of the debtor. It should not be forced. Okay. So again, taxes are not debts. Taxes arise from compulsory obligation because this is imposed by our law, okay, to the citizens. So if a taxpayer owes something to the government by way of taxes, and the government has a debt, for example, on which it has to pay the taxpayer, um, set off or compensation. But in this case, I it should be paid by the taxpayer in the form of cash. Okay. What about license fee? Okay, so license fee. This operates for the purpose of police power. So this is the purpose of our license fees are for regulation, while the taxes operates to raise the revenue for the government. Okay, So this is the basic distinction between, we have here the following distinction between tax and license fees. Taxes arises from the exercise of the taxing power, okay, while the license fees arise from police power. Okay, so again, because this is for regulation purposes. Second, taxes are for revenue, okay, while license fees are for regulation, as mentioned. Third, license fees cannot exceed the reasonable cost for the regulation, while taxes are not so limited. Okay, meaning, for example, if the taxpayer have violated or not paid and filed late later than the deadline, then taxes may be imposed of the surcharges and interest plus their tax dues or tax liability. Okay, while license fees are somewhat fixed in terms of amounts. Another is license fees can be imposed only on legal businesses and activities, while taxes can be imposed on legal and illegal businesses. Okay, you have to remember that um, in taxation, uh, all income and its sources, or the thing is that whenever a person generates income in whatever sources, it should be taxed. Okay, it should be subject to tax. So that's why even if that income was generated from an illegal business or activity, it is still subject to tax. Okay, because the idea here is that the person earned the income. Okay, and lastly, of course, failure to pay the license fees. The effect of this, it will make the business illegal, okay, to operate. While failure to pay a tax does not necessarily make the act business as illegal. Okay, so that's the difference between license fees and taxes. So here we have basically three kinds of license fees. Okay, so we have license tax. So basically, this is purely tax. The purpose is to raise the revenue. Another is license fee. So this is to regulate a useful occupation, okay, for police power. So again, this is to regulate, or the purpose of this is for regulation. Uh, Number three, license fee to regulate non-useful occupation. So the purpose of it is still to regulate. Okay, so but in this case, there are instances where there are license taxes, but again, taxes laws are different from license fees as we discussed earlier. Okay, so here, in addition, we have here the statement, license fee to regulate a useful occupation. This is the amount of fees that is to be imposed for purposes of regulation and should be reasonable in amount to cover the cost of inspection, surveillance, or regulation. So it has the rates, okay, fixed on that particular license fee. What about for the license fee to regulate a non-useful occupation? So this could go over and above the requirement of reasonableness, because the purpose of a license fee is to regulate non-useful occupation, is to discourage people from going into this kind of occupation, meaning this might be some illegal or inappropriate activities. Okay. Okay, so that's for our license fees and taxes. What about toll? Okay, so toll is not a tax. Toll is paid when you use or pass through a private property. So if you ever uh, experience going to Manila and, for example, traveling to the northern part like Ilocos or to Baguio or to other um, nearby places or provinces or region, um, to lessen the travel time. So the public transport, even the private vehicles, go through or pass over expressways. Okay, so these expressways classes are actually owned by a private entity. Okay, and before you can pass through this expressway, you have to go through uh, an area where you should pay your toll fee first before you can pass and use that expressway lane. Okay, so this is an example of a toll. And again, this is not tax. The purpose of collecting toll is again because you pass through or use a private property. Okay. Another is, what about special assessment or special levy? So this is different from a tax. An example is in our LGU or in the local government code. So the purpose of this special assessment is to recover the cost of improvement or infrastructure introduced by our LGUs. So only real property owners who were benefited, okay, by that improvement are subject to tax or special assessment. When the government has already recovered the cost, then this special assessment will be they will uh, stop collecting this special assessment. So this is limited. Unlike taxes, um, it is continuous for as long as you are earning income and the Congress will not repeal the tax laws. Okay. So this special levy imposed is normally on the land. Okay, if you have an area that is not, for example, if your area is not accessible to commercial activity because there are no roads or bridges there, so our local government unit will build the roads or bridges so that access to this remote area are possible. Okay, so in this case it is exceptional both as to time and locality. Okay, so depending on the situation. So for as long as the tax is not repealed, tax are assessed and collected against you forever. Okay, that is taxes. While in the case of a special assessment, again, once the cost for constructing the infrastructure was recovered, then special assessment collection will be stopped. Okay, so again, special assessment is not tax. Okay, so again, taxes are imposed upon persons, property, or even the rights. So therefore, so this brings us the principle that the scope of the power of taxation is unlimited or comprehensive. Okay, because other fees are limited, unlike taxes. So it almost covers all subjects. So we have this principle that the power to tax involves the power also to destroy, as mentioned before. That's why limitations are present. Okay. So the principle of or this principle of power of taxation that involves the power to destroy, this was rebutted by another principle actually. So the power to tax does not involve the power to destroy, while this court sits or there are some limitations again that is provided in our tax laws. Okay, so it tells us that while the power of taxation is unlimited or comprehensive, it is still subject to restrictions. Okay, so that is very important. So those are the different or other payments that were collected by the government agencies which are not taxes. So in this video lecture, we will continue with the last topic for our Module 1. So this is the power of the BIR and Commissioner of Internal Revenue. So we have here the powers and duties of the Bureau of Internal Revenue. So BIR shall be under the supervision and control of our Department of Finance. And its powers and duties shall comprehend the assessment and collection of all national internal revenue taxes, fees, charges, enforcement of all forfeitures, penalties, fines connected therewith, including judgments in all cases decided in its favor by the Court of Tax Appeals and the ordinary courts. So the Bureau shall give effect to and administer the supervisory and police powers conferred to it by our code or other laws. So this is the scope of the powers and duties of BIR. So basically, the main duties of BIR is to assess, meaning to determine the correct taxes that should be collected and the collection thereof, okay, of the payment for these tax liabilities from the taxpayers. Okay, so we have here the chief officials of the BIR. Okay, so BIR shall have a chief. Okay, so he is known to be the Commissioner of Internal Revenue. So he is the head of this office or agency. So hereinafter referred to as the commissioner. So most of the time he is referred to as the commissioner. Okay, and aside from him or her, there are four assistant chiefs. Okay, to be known as the deputy commissioner. Okay, so assistant chiefs are to be known as deputy commissioners. So what are the power of the commissioner? Okay, especially in interpreting the tax laws and deciding, for example, if there are cases or disputes with regards to the tax liabilities of the taxpayers. So here, the power to interpret the provisions of our law or code and other tax law shall be under the exclusive and original jurisdiction of the commissioner. So that's the power that is vested upon him. And this is subject to review by the Secretary of Finance because, again, BIR is under the Department of Finance. So the power to decide the dispute assessments or refunds of revenue taxes, fees or other charges, even the penalties imposed in relation thereto, or other matters that relates to the code or tax code or other laws or portion thereof administered by BIR is vested in the hands of the commissioner. So again, this is subject still to the exclusive appellate jurisdiction of the Court of Tax Appeals. Okay, so meaning it has to go through a due process before it can be finally decided on what verdict will be given to the dispute, okay, between the BIR and the taxpayer in relation to the tax liabilities. So the power of the commissioner. Okay, so this is another function to obtain information and to summon, examine, and take testimony of the persons. So, in ascertaining the correctness of any return upon filing of the income taxes or in making a return when none has been made, or even in determining the liability of any person for any internal revenue taxes, or collecting such liability, or even in evaluating the tax compliance, the commissioner has the following authority vested upon him. First, to examine any book, paper, record, or other data that are relevant or related to such inquiry made by the taxpayer. This is, of course, to serve as a proof, okay, if indeed the query of the taxpayer is correct. or has a basis. So this will also be used later on for the decision or verdict. Another is to obtain on a regular basis internal revenue tax liability, which is subject to audit or investigation. Okay, so this will also include BSP or Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, government-owned or controlled corporations, and other taxpayers. So any information such as, but not limited to, the cost and volume of production, the receipts or sales, gross income of the taxpayers, and other details that are necessary. Okay, so here, provided that the Cooperative Development Authority, in the case of the CDA, they shall submit to the Bureau their tax incentive report, which will include information in their income tax plus other business taxes related to the cooperatives. Okay, so again, this is to be used, okay, as basis for regulation if indeed um, they are uh, determining and paying the correct amount of taxes to the BIR. Okay. Third, the commissioner also is vested by the power of summoning the person who is liable for tax or required to file a return, or any officer or employee. Okay, having the custody of the books of accounts and the accounting records or entries related to the transactions or business transactions which relates to the income, okay, of that person or business. Another is to take such testimony of the person concerned under oath as may be relevant also, or uh, necessary for the related inquiry, meaning the commissioner may also collect information not only from the documents but also testimonies from the person concerned. Okay. Another is to cause revenue officers and employees to make canvass from time to time any revenue district or region and inquire after and concerning all persons who may be liable to pay the taxes. Okay, so the provisions of the paragraphs, notwithstanding, nothing in this section shall be construed as granting the commissioner the authority to inquire into bank deposits other than provided. So meaning to say, the power of the commissioner to inquire of the documents and other information is limited only, okay, especially in the case of a bank deposit, because this is under the because in this case, this I think this is covered by another law. I just forgot the exact law or provision for such, in which you cannot inquire the bank details or deposit of a person unless it is requested by the court, okay, or if the depositor has given their um, consent, okay, but generally uh, uh, this is not I mean, it is prohibited, okay, so please take note of that. What else? So the power of the commissioner to make assessment and prescribe additional requirements for tax administration and enforcement. So in this case, this will include examination of the income tax return and of course the determination of the tax due. So for example, if you have already computed and determined your tax liability in your income tax return, still the commissioner along with their assessors and auditors, okay, so they will reassess if indeed you are uh, including all the relevant data related to your income and expenses, or if you have determined and paid for the correct tax liabilities due. Okay, so those are the different powers of the commissioner. So in relation also, in addition, any return statement of the declaration filed in any office authorized to receive, okay, the same shall not be withdrawn, provided that within 3 years from the date of such filing, the same may be modified, changed, and provided further that no notice for audit or investigation shall of such return, statement, or declaration in the meantime been actually served upon the taxpayer. So again, in this power of the commissioner, so they have to follow again the due process. Okay, so to make sure that no violation also on the part of the taxpayer was made. Okay, so again, they have the guidelines set, okay, on how to do it. So those are the uh, power of the BIR and the Commissioner of Internal Revenue.